Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to take a journey into this incredible microscopic world to really get a handle on the building block of all life, the cell. You know, our story here doesn't start with some grand, complex theory. Nope. It all begins with a simple chance observation. Back in 1665, a scientist named Robert Hooke pointed a microscope he designed himself at a thin slice of cork, and he saw something that no one had ever seen before: a honeycomb of tiny, distinct compartments. So he called these little boxes cells, which comes from the Latin word for a little room. And look, this might sound like a small thing, but it was a huge leap for science. For the very first time, someone had actually seen that living things were made of separate individual units. Okay, so let's really get into this. Hooke's discovery basically kicked off this amazing scientific relay race that went on for almost 200 years. First up, Leeuwenhoek discovered these single, free-living cells just swimming around in pond water. Then, fast forward to the 1830s, and you have Schleiden and Schwann proposing, hey, maybe all plants and animals are made of cells. And finally, the last crucial piece of the puzzle came from Virchow, who stated that all cells have to come from cells that already exist. All right, so what are these cells really? Well, to figure that out, you don't have to look very far. In fact, something you probably have in your kitchen right now, an onion, can show us a pretty profound biological truth. It's actually pretty simple. You just prepare this temporary mount, peel off a super thin layer, add a little stain so you can see things clearly, and pop it under a microscope. And what you see? Well, it's pretty remarkable. What you'd find is that it doesn't matter if the onion is huge or tiny. It's made of the exact same fundamental building blocks. See, a bigger onion doesn't have bigger cells, it just has more of them. And that right there, that's a core principle in action. These little structures are the basic building units for the entire organism. So, that simple observation from an onion, plus all that work from those scientists we mentioned, that all led to what we now call the cell theory. And its core ideas, man, they are the absolute bedrock of how we understand all life, from a single tiny bacterium to a massive blue whale. Okay, to really wrap our heads around how a cell works, I want you to picture something. Think of it like a tiny, bustling city. And inside this city, you've got all these different structures. We call them organelles, and they each have a specific job to do to keep the whole thing running. Right? Every city needs a government, a control center, a place to give out orders, and a super secure vault to keep the master blueprints for everything. Well, in our cell city, that's the nucleus. It's this big, usually round structure that's basically in charge of everything. It directs all the cell's chemical activities, and, most importantly, it holds the precious genetic material, our DNA. Yeah, think of it just like a city hall. The nucleus holds the chromosomes, which are made of DNA, and these are the master blueprints we were talking about. They have all the info needed to build and organize the entire city. Okay, so we have our city hall, but what about industry? The infrastructure? I mean, a city needs factories to build stuff and highways to move it all around, right? Well, that's where the endoplasmic reticulum comes in, or just ER for short. This thing is a massive network of membrane-bound tubes and sheets that spreads all throughout the cell's cytoplasm. The ER really is both a factory and a highway system, all rolled into one. You've got the rough ER, which is covered in these little things called ribosomes that make proteins. Then there's the smooth ER, which makes lipids. And the whole network acts like a channel to ship these materials wherever they need to go in the cell. So all this building and shipping, you can imagine it takes a ton of energy. A city this busy needs a super reliable power source to keep going. And that's where the mitochondria come in. You've probably heard of them. They're famously called the powerhouses of the cell. These incredible organelles take in nutrients and convert them into something called ATP, which is basically the energy cache that the cell spends to do, well, everything. Exactly. The mitochondria are the city's power plants. They're working 24/7, just churning out the energy needed for every single chemical reaction required for life, from building new things to just getting work done. Without them, the whole city would just stop. Okay, so this city analogy is great, but it's really important to know that not all cellular cities are built the same. While the basic plan is similar, there are some fundamentally different blueprints out there. The biggest difference, the most fundamental one, is between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotes, like bacteria, are way simpler and smaller. They don't have a real nucleus. Their DNA just kind of floats around in an area called the nucleoid. But eukaryotic cells, that's us, plants, animals, fungi, we're much larger, more complex, and our DNA is kept safe and sound inside a proper nucleus, along with a ton of other specialized organelles. And even within that complex eukaryotic world, you still see different city plans. Take an animal cell versus a plant cell. The animal cell city is pretty flexible, but the plant cell city, it's built this tough, rigid outer wall made of cellulose for support. Plants also have their own little solar power stations, called chloroplasts, to do photosynthesis. Oh, and they have this huge central vacuole that's like a giant water tank, which also helps keep the cell firm. Okay, so let's zoom back out for a second and think about the big picture. What does all this microscopic complexity, what does it all really mean? What it means is that every single living thing, and yes, that includes you, is basically a universe built from these tiny, incredibly organized structures. Every single cell is performing the basic functions of life: breathing, eating, getting rid of waste, all thanks to the teamwork of its organelles. And that is why the cell is the true, fundamental, functional unit of all life.
And this amazing organization, it doesn't just sit there, it's constantly renewing itself. Just like Rudolf Virchow so brilliantly put it, all cells come from cells that already exist. Through cell division, life can grow, it can repair itself, and it can continue that whole incredible cycle. I mean, it's a pretty staggering thought, isn't it? If every single one of your cells is its own tiny living city, working in perfect harmony with trillions of others, what does that make us? A metropolis on an epic scale? And to think, it all started with one person, a simple lens, and a little piece of cork.